Is this crazy? We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in the history of Make America Great Again. How can you be against it?
President Trump is on his first big overseas trip in this second term. He's chosen the Middle East as his destination, and all anybody can talk about is whether the nation of Qatar is going to give Trump a plane, described as a palace in the sky. Ethics concerns? Anyone? Show of hands? There's really so much to talk about, though, related to Trump's agenda. Just announced that the U.S. will end sanctions on Syria. Yesterday, we saw the release of the last living American hostage by Hamas. So let's dive in with my panel. This is Sidebar from the Washington Post, and I'm Libby Casey, joined by Rhonda Colvin, James Hohmann, and Abigail Hauslohner, national security reporter. Thrilled to have you with us, Abby. You have a deep history of reporting on the Middle East and foreign policy, as well as U.S. national security. James, kick us off with what we saw Trump and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia do today.
A lot of pomp and circumstance and a lot of news. You mentioned that Trump said at the end of a speech that he's removing sanctions on Syria in order to, quote, give them a chance at greatness. He's supposed to meet with the Syrian leader tomorrow.
I mean, that's significant to even meet with the Syrian leader.
It's a very, very big deal in the region, and we've come a long way in not that long. But the two sides announced that the Saudis are going to make an investment commitment of $600 billion in the U.S. Now, that's pretty vague. There's not a lot of specifics. Trump said he wants it to be $1 trillion. But one specific we do have is that it is a $142 billion arms deal that the Saudis are promising to buy $142 billion in American weapons. Now, it's not clear how much of that is stuff they've already planned to buy. Trump likes the big ticket number. There were a bunch of other announcements around all of this in big and small. A lot of the top CEOs of the country were there. And the Trump administration is basically allowing the Saudis to get tens of thousands of super advanced artificial intelligence chips that the Biden people had stopped them from getting because they were worried they'd end up in China. And so that's why you have, all the big players in that space. And then in good news for DC, Trump also signed an agreement with the Saudi government that will mean that the National Zoo is going to get a new permanent exhibit dedicated to supporting the conservation of the Arabian leopard, one of the Saudi animals. So that's coming soon to the National Zoo.
Okay. Well, I'm going to...
Diplomacy, yes.
Yeah.
Leopard diplomacy.
Yeah, it worked in China with the pandas, right? So, Rhonda, James mentioned the pomp and circumstance. I mean, this is so laden with literally a carpet rolled out and so much... Trump's being treated like a king, right? Like a world leader, but also a king. And I'm kind of realizing why he might need a new plane, because he brought his whole cabinet, basically. He brought Elon Musk, and all these CEOs came from the U.S., having this global interest in what's happening in the Middle East. Just talk about some of the optics of this, because you were mentioning that it felt almost more like a Trump campaign rally when he gave a speech today.
Yeah, when you look at the optics of this trip and some of the visuals we've been getting so far, you do see that this is a very Trumpian trip, right? This matches exactly what type of persona President Trump has always put out there. There's a lot of opulence. You mentioned the red carpet. He was met right at Air Force One on the tarmac by MBS. He received a warm welcome, and he's surrounded by the things that really matter to him and show him as this deal maker, which I think is really central to the reason why this is his first trip. Of course, this was also, the region was also his first trip the first time around when he was president. But
on that trip, I remember it was part of a broader tour.
Right. It was a part of a broader tour.
He hit Europe, he hit some democracies, right?
But this feels a little more targeted. And I think it's also interesting, too, when you look at maybe the realigning of geopolitics that we are experiencing right now, that Saudi Arabia also is getting something out of this, too. If you think about it, they've been a player since the beginning of his second term. MBS was one of the first foreign officials to call him.
Mohammed bin Salman.
Yes, and pledge billions of dollars over the course of the next 4 years to the United States. Saudi Arabia served as the site for the Ukraine-Russia talks, where Rubio led a delegation there to talk about ending that war. So that was just a a few weeks ago. So I think this trip, it's one of those things that feels very transactional right now. But when you look at the optics, of course, like if those who are able to see what we're playing on screen, you're seeing that this is, part of a way for Trump to shine.
Yeah. You can watch us on YouTube. Just look for The Washington Post. If you're listening to us on your podcast app, just go to the Washington Post homepage and check out some of the images that our team is capturing there. Abby, I think Rhonda said an important word, which is transactional. I mean, what is this trip really about?
Well, I mean, I think Trump hasn't tried to hide the fact that it's about money mostly. He's currently engaged in this trade war and trying to negotiate bilateral deals with dozens of countries worldwide. And Saudi Arabia has a lot of things that Trump wants and vice versa. It's also kind of, as Rhonda mentioned, this is a country where the relationship between Trump and Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, has been building and deepening for years now, and between the crown prince and Trump's family. And Saudi Arabia kind of epitomizes everything that Trump looks for in a foreign leader or admires in another leader. This is not a democracy. This is a strongman government where, with a very rich monarchy, a lot of opulence. Trump, in defending the Qatari plane gift yesterday, made some comment along the lines of, well, when you go to Arab countries like these Gulf monarchies, and you see their planes and how nice they are, it's worth remarking here, those are not democracies where these are monarchies sort of ruled with an iron fist, particularly in Saudi's case. And so, Trump and his family have been cultivating very close deals with the monarchy since his first term. It's worth noting that MBS and the Saudi government's sovereign wealth fund have invested in Jared Kushner's personal business. That's Trump's son-in-law. That raised a lot of eyebrows right after Trump left office and his son-in-law was kicking off this new company. The Saudis, are engaged with Trump's family on the cryptocurrency business. Saudi Arabia is host to, I think, 2 Trump hotels or 1 Trump hotel, and there's and are interested in potentially more real estate deals. So there's a lot of personal business mixed in with this. And at the same time, this is a really rich country that can offer, billions of dollars potentially in investments or in the appearance of investments in the United States, so that Trump basically has a big check to hold up to say, look at my incredible diplomacy and what I've been able to bring home for the American people.
Can you talk more, James, about some of those conflict of interest questions? We'll talk more about MBS in a moment, but let's just start with the conflicts of interest, because Trump, has said, I'm not, my hands are off my companies, my sons are running things. The Trump name is still attached to it all.
Yeah, and it's such a difference from 8 years ago, where really Trump did make an effort 8 years ago to pretend that there was more of a disconnect than there is now. They're not hiding it at all. Trump obviously has his crypto investments that are deeply tied into the region, but Don Jr. and Eric Trump have basically been almost like pre-advancing this trip that Trump's doing. The president's sons have crisscrossed the Middle East in recent weeks. Eric spoke in Dubai about the Trump organization's plan to build an 80-floor hotel and residential tower there. They have a bunch of other stuff scheduled. And Qatar, where the president's going to visit on Wednesday, has previously entered into an agreement with Eric Trump to build a $5.5 billion golf club there. And then the president's going to end his trip in Abu Dhabi, where the Trump family cryptocurrency venture last week inked an investment deal with a firm backed by the government, their sovereign wealth fund, which says it's going to put $2 billion into this Trump venture. So, it all taken together is sort of honestly pretty breathtaking, and really just a factor of 1,000 times worse than whatever we were talking about with, the Trump hotel during the first term. Now, the president is exempt from conflict of interest laws, but he is restricted by the Constitution from receiving gifts from foreign governments without the consent of Congress.
But can we bring up the meme coin thing
Yes,
too?
please.
How much do you have to buy to get dinner with Trump?
Millions.
So and there's no way. Critics have pointed out the really problematic, an additional problematic aspect of that is that there's no way of tracking where those who is making these purchases. So it could be foreign governments, it could be foreign businesses, it could be, Vladimir Putin, and it doesn't, there's no transparency involved there. So it really opens the door to potential foreign bribes and all kinds of violations of the Constitution.
Let's talk about Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince. I've been sort of shocked that there hasn't been more of a hand-in-hand mention with his name with the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And there just hasn't been a lot in the coverage. Remind us who Jamal Khashoggi was, what happened?
Jamal Khashoggi was a Saudi diplomat, Saudi newspaper proprietor who became a dissident and a contributing columnist for the Washington Post. The CIA determined in 2018 that Mohammed bin Salman personally ordered the assassination of Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. And the Biden administration, when they took over, Joe Biden campaigned in 2020 on making the Saudis a pariah state, and they released this assessment from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence that's very devastating and goes through a bunch of unclassified intelligence. But then oil prices went up after Russia invaded Ukraine, and the Biden folks were desperate. And so Biden flew to meet with MBS. There was the fist bump heard around the world. They thought it would look less bad than a handshake to have the fist bump, and ended up backfiring. And then the Biden administration, to get Saudis help on some other stuff, ended up saying that MBS was immune from a civil lawsuit because of sovereign immunity. And so, a lot of this, it's now been 7 years. It's very hard. I work every day with a lot of people who work very closely with him. And today Trump is standing there. He called MBS an incredible man, my good friend. It was very, very buddy. When Trump came on stage with MBS in Riyadh, he came on to God Bless the USA. And when he left the stage, it was YMCA, which is one of his typical rally songs. And the Crown Prince joined him on the stage. So I think it's a far cry from 7 years ago.
And I would say this also gets at one of the things that's sort of less tangible that Saudi is looking for from Trump, and that's just legitimacy. And obviously, it's a state, it's a legitimate state, but Saudi Arabia has always had kind of this like on again, off again, tense, close frenemy relationship with the United States, where the United States gives a ton of military aid to Saudi, and really needs the Saudis, has sought out the Saudis' assistance on different things, but also democratic administrations, particularly and some previous Republican administrations, chafe at Saudi Arabia's long history of serious human rights abuses. And obviously, the monarchy's assassination, really brutal kidnapping and assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. And so, what Trump sort of showed that he had to offer during his first term, and still is a willingness to look the other way and to not be a thorn in Saudi Arabia's side. And they really want that. They want to increase kind of their image and their presence in the Middle East. They want to be a major player or the major player. I think the Crown Prince would love to see Saudi Arabia surpass Israel as the United States' key strategic partner, economic partner in the region. And so having, a partner in Trump who is no longer interested in kind of hammering MBS over the head with human rights concerns is a big deal.
Trump is not going to Israel on this trip. Which is a fascinating decision because of the close relationship that he and Bibi Netanyahu was sort of cultivating during the first Trump term. But we had some great reporting from our colleagues Matt Weiser and Michael Birnbaum, who have been, they're on this trip, they're tracking the story really closely, and they did a great sort of setup piece of this trip, Rhonda. And they had this great quote. One senior White House official said there was no need to have a conversation with Netanyahu, to like go to Israel and meet with him, because Netanyahu had already visited Washington 700 times since Trump's inauguration. A major exaggeration. But the point is like, what do you read from that?
I mean, Netanyahu is someone that, Trump administration is pretty close to, cozy with.
Is this a snub, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
James says yes.
I think it could be. James, if you want to weigh in on that. He has a little bit more breadth to
The
bring in
BB
his
people
opinion.
certainly, BB thinks it is.
Okay. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, it's what he has come a bunch. One of the embarrassing details that leaked out during the first Trump term was that Bibi would bring suitcases full of dirty laundry because he'd stay at the Blair House and the White House staff would have to do all the laundry. But he did come. There was a scoop by our colleague John Hudson, I believe.
You're reacting to my face, which is like, ooh. Like, okay.
You don't do that on vacation when you visit your.
When I go visit my parents, maybe I'm going to be
In college.
Anyway, that's an aside. But, when Bibi did come and meet with Trump, he was standing with him at the White House, and Trump announces that they're going to begin nuclear talks with Iran. And they did not give Netanyahu a heads up, and the body language was wild because Netanyahu was like floored and like looked away, literally trying to save face and not be on camera. And there have been two other big things that Trump has done that really pissed off the Israelis. Negotiating directly with Hamas in secret to get the release of the last living American hostage. And then also Trump announced this deal to stop bombing the Houthi rebels in Yemen to curb attacks on U.S. ships. But the deal didn't cover Israel, and Israel wasn't involved in the talks. Now, when you talk to Israeli officials and allies here in Washington, they will blame Steve Witkoff, the president's envoy for the Middle East. They say that Witkoff is influenced by his personal business ties with Qatar. And one of the most interesting, I think, surprising developments of the foreign policy of the Trump administration has been the degree to which, I think everyone assumed Trump was going to be so pro-Israel, but Mike Waltz was really pushed out as national security advisor, not because of Signalgate, but because Trump perceived him as coordinating too closely with Israel related to military strikes in Iran. And you have some sort of anti-Israel elements inside the White House, and the Waltz getting pushed out as national security advisor has really sent a chill to people inside the administration not to be overly cozy with the Israelis.
Abby, how significant is it that the U.S. was negotiating directly with Hamas for the release of Edan Alexander, who we did see released yesterday?
Well, from a U.S. strategic point of view, and I think certainly a lot of the isolationists in the White House would agree, it makes sense. You negotiate with the people who are holding your hostage. But it's obviously, as James mentioned, it's a huge break with tradition. This is the U.S. and Israel for a long time have had an extraordinarily and uniquely close relationship on matters of aid, on intelligence sharing, on security cooperation, to the point that, critics on Capitol Hill and elsewhere, sometimes complain that the U.S. defers to Israel too much or treats Israel like a state when it is not, as in a U.S. state, not a foreign state. So as James mentioned, this is what we're seeing now, I think, is this tension in the White House between the isolationist wing who want to see the United States, who might sort of dismiss Israel as, well, we're not Israel. U.S. policy is U.S. policy, not Israeli policy. Same as, Russian, well, in theory. Won't go there. And then you have, the traditionalists, sort of the hawks, who are even less represented this time around than they were in Trump's first term, who want to see more of a continuation of this very steady, strong U.S. support for Israel in all of Israel's objectives. And I should add, of the various things that have irked Netanyahu, there's also, just announced an hour or so ago, Trump has decided to lift U.S. sanctions on Syria that were imposed on the Assad regime. And that's another thing the Israelis, I think, really didn't want to see. They are not interested in having a new kind of strong Syrian government led by Islamists on their northern border. So that is something that, they're not going to be pleased with, and his outreach and closeness to the Gulf states. They announced today, or was it yesterday, a vague agreement on cooperating with Saudi Arabia on energy development. A very controversial aspect of that has been Saudi Arabia's ambitions to develop nuclear energy. That's something that makes the Israelis very nervous. And we don't know if that's part of this sort of memorandum, but it might be. And, that's another thing that, that alarms Netanyahu. And so it's interesting that we've seen, on the one hand, this president who is a great thing for Israel or the Israeli government in many ways, in that, he's no longer putting pressure on them like the Biden administration was over what Israel's doing in Gaza, over what Israel's doing in the West Bank, over the way it handles and treats Palestinians in general. But he's doing all these other things in the region without consulting Israel when Israel is used to being consulted. And so that is sort of a whiplash, I think, for Netanyahu.
And I'm told by Trump allies that one of the reasons that Trump is angry at Bibi still is that Netanyahu congratulated Joe Biden on his victory in 2020 when Trump was still trying to overturn it before.
Can that be real?
It is.
I mean,
and so there is tension there, and I think Trump has the credibility because he's seen as such a supporter of Israel.
Netanyahu really needs him more than Trump needs Netanyahu, because it's already there.
And
right?
Netanyahu's taking a political hit at home, because his whole pitch to his people is, I'm so close, I can get the U.S. to do anything I want. When he was running in 2019, he had billboards about how he had gotten Trump to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It's a big change.
So much of what I'm hearing you all talk about is really this trip is about transactions, it's about money, it's about deals. What we're not talking about is a re-up of the Abraham Accords or trying to solve the crisis in Gaza. So what does that tell you, Rhonda, in terms of the administration's priorities?
I think it says a lot, because even if let's zoom out a little bit. When a president chooses a first foreign trip, it's to send some sort of message. I was actually looking at the State Department's history website of all of the foreign trips that presidents have made going back to Roosevelt. The Middle East is usually not on the list, or a president goes later on in their term. It is never one of the first 2 to 3 trips. It's usually Canada, Mexico, or Japan, or something like that, or Europe. So that shows you the priority that the Trump administration may want to put on the Middle East, trying to frame them as a friend when other predecessors have not. Regardless of all the inner workings and the chess match of what Trump is doing, he is sending a message through this.
But we're not
I think
talking,
the fact
he said
that we're
he
not
promised
seeing,
to,
right, we're not seeing any sort of real deep diplomatic choices come out of this, or big announcements, although the sanctions, lifting the sanctions off to Syria was a big deal. You're not seeing any sort of peace agreements. That tells you that the administration wants to focus on perhaps the economic initiatives they've been talking about, that making this a deal-making trip. That on the surface is what seems to be the message, but it does not seem like there's going to be any major
the trip isn't over, right? The trip isn't over yet,
right.
But
he has 2 more places to go to.
But I'm old enough to remember when Trump was promising to end the war in Gaza. It was like a no-brainer. This can be taken care of quite efficiently and easily.
Yeah, it's sort of like what I said at the top of our show. Trump is a person who is very aware of optics. Yeah. He is a producer probably at heart, where he knows how these things look. So if he is able to go spend a week in the Middle East, come back appearing to be a deal maker, whether it's the weapons deals, right, or being in his comfort zone. If people see clips of the speech he gave at the Economic Forum, it felt like a Trump rally almost, or like he was in front of the CPAC group. Wow, he felt very, very comfortable. So it just shows that this is a lot about him and how he wants to appear, not necessarily some diplomatic moves that might be, make or break.
Let's talk about the plane. Okay, so Donald Trump lets the world know that Qatar's offered him a plane, that he basically plans to take it. Let's play some sort of Q&A as eyebrows were raised about this.
Mr. President, what do you say to people who view that luxury jet as a personal gift to you? Why not leave it behind?
You're ABC fake news, right?
Why not leave
only ABC? Well, a few of you would. Let me tell you, you should be embarrassed asking that question. They're giving us a free jet. I could say, no, don't give us, I want to pay you $1 billion or 400 million or whatever it is. Or I could say, thank you very much.
Donald Trump trying to evade a question from Rachel Scott of ABC News. So where to begin? So Qatar has sort of walked carefully around this with kind of sum up the denial or the clarification from Qatar about this.
No
James?
final decisions have been made.
Not happening on this trip.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
But it's out there and Trump's saying.
And it appears that conversations have been happening about this for months and months. And there's
I realized Trump has been on the plane. That plane flew
in Florida.
Right,
it is in a hangar
flew to Florida.
in San Antonio right now. And like you said, there will be no announcements made on this trip. But it does seem to be sort of in this gray area right now. Like I said, it's in the United States. But Trump seems to be framing this, and I'm kind of curious if he believes what he was saying just now about, hey, this is a free gift. Air Force One needs these, renovations and fixing, and that is true. So why not accept this free gift? But of course, there's the law and there's the Constitution.
Tell us more, Rhonda.
And that it's not a free gift.
Right.
That's the other thing, too. Is it really free? So the emoluments clause, which I believe we have for those who are able to see it, right there. Yes, straight from Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 of the U.S. Constitution. Very clear. It does say that no office holder is able to accept a gift from a foreign entity without the consent of Congress. This is something that has been debated, honestly, since the late 1700s. Accepting gifts from foreign kings or governments has always been a concern, or was a concern for the framers, because it is a way to get to influence a president.
But Caroline Levitt, press secretary, on a sort of eyebrow-raising question on Fox News about it, was like, and I'm paraphrasing here, was like, everyone knows President Trump is doing things for the American people. That's what his goal is. That's his agenda. So
then send it to Capitol Hill, and that's, when the French gave us the Statue of Liberty, Congress had to debate it and vote it. And on his last day in office, Ulysses S. Grant in 1877 signed the law accepting the gift from France. There have been other times Martin Van Buren got from a sultan 2 elephants, and Congress said, no, you can't take them.
Yep.
And they had to go to a zoo. The Pam Bondi, the attorney general who signed the memo saying it would be okay to take this plane, she was on the payroll of Qatar to the tune of $115,000 a month. Kash Patel, the FBI director, was on the payroll of Qatar. And I think bringing it back to the first trip, if I can quickly, in 2017, Trump goes to Saudi Arabia. We haven't talked about the orb, but there was that, famous photo op of them touching the orb. And it does appear that trip actually triggered what became known as the Qatar crisis, which is that Trump embraced the Saudis so closely that in 2017, Bahrain, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE boycotted Qatar over its support of Islamists in the region and its ties to Iran. And Trump initially criticized Qatar very strongly. He said that they have, quote, historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level. A year later, he ends up praising Qatar and rolling that back. The 4 nations end their boycott. But I think Qatar obviously has an incentive to never let something like that happen again. And so if you are giving the president the plane he's using, he's not going to support a boycott against you.
Abby, you said it's not free.
It's not free. Let's talk about all the upgrades. This is what former Secret Service members and the Air Force have noted. For the president to fly in a plane, there are huge standards that have to be applied. So it's unclear how long and how much it would cost simply to retrofit this Qatari plane to make it suitable for the president to fly in, to give it all of the defenses, and to secure it. And so, it's remarkable in that way. It's certainly not free. It's unclear how much it would cost American taxpayers to get it up to speed. And former Secret Service agents told, our colleagues, Natalie Allison and others in their story last night, that essentially, they would have to take the plane down to a skeleton, completely turn it inside out, take it apart and rebuild it in order to get it up to the standards for the president's Air Force One. And this is while Boeing is currently working on 2 other planes to replace Air Force One. And the Air Force told Congress just last week that those should be ready, they think, in 2027.
And then one other last part of this is that Trump is saying it's not going to me, it's going to the Defense Department, but then the plane would go to his presidential library afterwards. Basically, he would get it. So there's a lot of questions about the propriety and ethics of that. Rhonda, I know Congress is reacting a lot. We are out of time this week on Sidebar, but we'll see if this continues to bubble up or if it sort of just fades away. I don't know, like a jet in the sky, floating away into the clouds. So we might be talking more about congressional reaction because there are some Republicans who are not feeling comfortable about this.
I have a feeling we will be able to talk about Congress and this plane at a later date. So stay tuned.
Rhonda Colvin, James Hohmann. I do know who you are, and Abigail Hauslohner. Thank you so much to all 3 of you. So much going on in this trip, and I'm so glad we got to talk about it. I'm Libby Casey. That's it for Sidebar for today. We'll be back on Thursday. Planes, other things. We'll see what comes up on the radar.
Libby
Trains, automobiles. Find us on YouTube. We are at The Washington Post on YouTube, or listen to us on your favorite podcast app. We'll talk to you on Thursday.